The boy had lived on the streets for as long as he could remember. Each day was a struggle, a fight to survive. He had no home, no family to turn to, and no one to care for him. The city streets were harsh and unforgiving, filled with people who walked past him without a second glance. Yet he had learned to navigate them, to find scraps of food and to find small places to sleep safely at night. Despite everything, there was something bright and alive inside him, a spark of courage and hope that kept him moving forward. He woke early that morning as he always did, his stomach growling from hunger. The chill in the air made him shiver, and he pulled his thin jacket tighter around himself. He wandered through the quiet streets, hoping to find something to eat, a warm place to rest for a few moments, or maybe some coins from a passerby. Life had taught him to be alert, to notice the smallest details and to trust his instincts. And today, his instincts told him that something unusual was about to happen. As he turned a corner near a quiet part of the city, he noticed a commotion near the riverbank. A woman, dressed in fine clothes that shimmered in the morning light, had slipped on the wet stones and fallen dangerously close to the water. Her heels were tangled and she struggled to maintain her balance. People were gathered around, unsure of what to do, and the boy could see fear in their eyes. He didn't think about the danger. He only saw someone in trouble who needed help. Without hesitation, he sprinted forward, his small frame moving quickly over the uneven ground. He reached the woman just as she was about to lose her footing completely. Grabbing her arm, he steadied her and helped her onto safer ground. The water was cold and dangerous, and one wrong move could have swept her away. She gasped, startled by the sudden appearance of this small, brave boy who had saved her. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice steady despite the pounding of his heart. The woman nodded, still catching her breath. She looked at him with wide eyes, unsure of what to say. She wanted to thank him, but the words didn't come easily. He simply nodded, not seeking praise or recognition. His only concern was her safety. After making sure she was completely out of danger, he stepped back, ready to disappear into the crowd before anyone could notice him too closely. But the woman's gaze followed him. There was something in his eyes, a mixture of fear and determination that touched her deeply. She had never seen anyone like him before, someone so young yet so courageous. She opened her mouth to speak, but before she could, the boy turned and ran, slipping through the narrow streets and alleyways where he knew no one would follow. He had saved a life, but the city would not let him linger. The woman stood there for a moment, her heart still racing. She clutched the edge of her coat and watched as the boy disappeared from view. She wanted to call out to him, to make sure he was safe, but she realized she didn't even know his name. All she knew was that someone had risked everything to help her. A stranger who had nothing yet gave everything in that moment. Meanwhile, the boy moved quickly, weaving through the city with a careful, practiced ease. He was used to escaping notice, used to being invisible to most people. But something about today felt different. There was a warmth in his chest, a feeling that perhaps he had done something truly meaningful. Saving her had given him a sense of purpose, even if no one would ever know who he was or what he had done. He found a small spot behind a closed bakery, where the morning sun warmed a section of the wall. He sat down, pulling his knees close to his chest, and finally allowed himself a moment to breathe. His stomach growled again, reminding him of the reality of his life, but for a brief moment he felt alive in a way he hadn't for a long time. He had made a difference, even if it was just for one person, and that thought stayed with him as he tried to ignore the emptiness in his stomach. The city continued on around him. People rushing to their jobs, drivers honking their horns, and the sounds of daily life filling the air. But the boy felt detached from it all. He was part of the city, yet apart from it, moving in the shadows where no one truly looked. And yet in that moment he felt a strange connection to someone who had noticed him, even if only for a few seconds. Later that day, the woman returned to her home, her mind filled with thoughts of the boy who had saved her. She couldn't shake the image of his determined face, the bravery in his small hands. She told no one about what had happened, knowing that most people wouldn't understand. Her husband, a successful businessman, would probably dismiss it as a minor accident, but to her it had been something much more profound. Someone had risked their life for hers, and that someone had nothing to gain, nothing to expect in return. She felt a mix of gratitude and curiosity, wondering who he was and how his life had led him to that moment. Back on the streets, the boy scavenged for food, finding a few scraps left behind by a nearby cafe. He ate quietly, thinking about the day's events. Despite his hunger and exhaustion, he felt a sense of pride. He had acted without thinking about himself, without worrying about the consequences. He had been brave, and in a world that often overlooked people like him, that bravery was a treasure he held tightly to himself. As evening approached, the streets grew colder and the shadows longer. The boy found a place to sleep, a small nook behind a closed shop where he could rest safely for the night. He curled up, pulling his thin jacket around him like a shield, and drifted into a light, restless sleep. In his dreams, he saw the woman's grateful eyes, and he imagined a life where courage and kindness mattered more than fear and hunger. Meanwhile, the woman couldn't stop thinking about the boy. She felt compelled to find him, to thank him properly, and perhaps to understand his story. There was something about his eyes, the way he had moved with such purpose and fearlessness, that made her heart ache with both admiration and compassion. She knew she had to do something, though she wasn't yet sure what. The next morning, the boy woke to the sounds of the city stirring again. He stretched, feeling the stiffness in his limbs, and set out to face another day of survival. But the memory of yesterday lingered, a reminder that even in his harsh world, moments of human connection and courage could shine through. He didn't know it yet, but his actions had set in motion a chain of events that would change his life forever. Little did he know, the woman had spoken to her husband about what had happened. Though he was skeptical, the story of a homeless boy risking his life for her had planted a seed of curiosity. The woman was determined to find the boy, to see him again, and to understand the courage that had driven him to act when most would have looked away. And so, the boy continued his day, moving through the city as he always did, unaware of the attention he had drawn, unaware of the gratitude and curiosity that his bravery had inspired. He simply lived, surviving moment by moment until fate would bring their paths together once more. The city was large, the streets were endless, and the boy was just a small figure moving through the shadows, but his actions had already begun to ripple outward, touching lives in ways he could never have imagined. That day, as he wandered through the streets in search of food and shelter, he held onto a small sense of pride. For the first time in a long time, he felt that he had done something meaningful, that he had mattered in a world that often ignored him. And somewhere, in a home far from the cold streets, a woman thought of him with gratitude and wonder, wondering how someone so small and fragile could have shown such courage. It was a beginning, a spark that would soon ignite into something far greater than either of them could have imagined. The day after the boy saved the woman, the city seemed different. The streets still bustled with people, cars honking and vendors shouting, but there was a quiet energy in the boy's mind that he hadn't felt before. Something had shifted inside him. He moved cautiously through the alleys and streets, keeping an eye out for anything unusual, but also feeling a strange sense of purpose. The memory of the woman's frightened yet grateful face lingered, giving him a feeling he had rarely known, pride in doing something truly right. Meanwhile, the woman could not stop thinking about the boy. She replayed the moment over and over in her mind, imagining his small hands gripping hers. The fear in his eyes mingled with determination. She had told no one about the incident at first, but her curiosity and admiration grew stronger by the hour. She felt compelled to find him, to see him again, and to understand who he was. Who was this brave boy who risked his life for a stranger? She kept thinking that someone with so little could show such courage, and that made her heart ache with both wonder and concern. Her husband, a man used to control and logic, was skeptical when she mentioned the boy. He found it hard to believe that someone living on the streets could act so selflessly, without expecting anything in return. But she insisted that he had to see it from her perspective, that bravery and kindness were not limited to those with wealth or status. She described the boy's appearance, his thin jacket, the dirt on his hands and face, and the courage in his eyes. She wanted to find him before the city swallowed him up, as it had swallowed so many others like him. The boy continued his day, searching for food and avoiding the people who might cause him trouble. He was used to moving quickly, to staying out of sight, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. Yesterday he had been invisible to most of the world, yet someone had truly seen him. That realization stayed with him like a quiet warmth inside, and it gave him courage he had never known. It made him think that maybe, just maybe, there was more to life than survival. Maybe he could do more than just scrape by. As he navigated the streets, he came across a small group of children playing near an empty lot. They were younger than him, and he noticed the hunger and fear in their eyes, just as he had felt every day. Without thinking, he gave them some of the scraps he had found, sharing what little he had. The children looked at him with surprise and gratitude, and he felt a strange sense of connection. It reminded him that even in the harshest circumstances, small acts of kindness could matter. This feeling stayed with him as he moved forward, making him feel stronger and more determined. Meanwhile, the woman made a decision. She could no longer ignore the pull she felt toward finding the boy. She asked her driver to take her to the area near the riverbank where the accident had happened. She walked slowly, observing every detail, hoping to catch a glimpse of him. The streets were busy and people barely noticed her as she passed. She looked at the children playing, the street vendors and the small alleyways, scanning for any sign of him. Her heart raced with both hope and worry. The boy had moved to a quieter part of the city, where the streets were narrower and the buildings older. He felt safe there, at least for a while. He found a small corner to sit and rest, hidden from the main road. He ate the little food he had gathered, savoring each bite. Despite his hunger, he felt a sense of peace. Yesterday's act of bravery had given him a spark of hope, something he had not felt in a long time. He began to think about the future, imagining what it might be like to have someone care about him, to have a place to sleep that was warm and safe. As the day went on, the woman moved slowly through the streets, her eyes scanning every shadow, every corner. She asked a few street vendors if they had seen a boy matching the description she had, but most shook their heads, uninterested or unwilling to help. Yet she didn't give up. She felt a deep sense of determination, as if some invisible thread connected her to him. She knew she had to find him, not just to thank him, but because she believed that someone so brave and kind deserved more than the streets could offer. The boy, unaware of her search, continued his routine. He avoided the busy streets where people might notice him, and moved through alleyways and hidden corners. He found small ways to survive, scavenging for food and avoiding trouble. Yet he could not shake the memory of the woman's grateful eyes. It was the first time anyone had looked at him and truly seen him, not as a homeless boy, but as a person capable of courage and compassion. That memory gave him strength and comfort, even as he faced the harsh realities of his life. In the afternoon, a sudden rain began to fall, drenching the streets and making the alleys slippery and dangerous. The boy ran for cover, finding a small shelter under a set of stairs. He shivered, pulling his thin jacket tighter around him. The rain reminded him of how vulnerable he truly was, how easily the world could overwhelm him. Yet even in that moment of fear and discomfort, he felt a quiet pride. He had saved someone's life, and that was something no one could take away from him. The woman, determined to continue her search despite the rain, took shelter under a nearby awning. She watched the people rushing by, hoping to catch sight of the boy. Her heart ached as she thought of him alone on the streets, exposed to the cold and the rain. She felt a deep desire to protect him, to make sure he was safe. That desire grew stronger with every passing moment, and she knew that she could not rest until she had found him. As the rain eased, the boy decided it was time to move again. He carefully navigated the wet streets, looking for a place where he could rest for the night. He found a small abandoned building with a broken door and slipped inside. It was dark and cold, but it offered some protection from the elements. He curled up in a corner, wrapping his jacket around himself, and allowed himself to rest. Sleep came slowly, filled with dreams of the woman's grateful eyes and the hope that maybe someday his life could be different. Back at her home, the woman spoke to her husband again. She described the boy's courage, his selflessness, and the kindness she had glimpsed in his actions. She emphasized that he deserved recognition and help, and she could not stop thinking about him. Her husband, while still skeptical, began to see her determination and the sincerity in her eyes. He agreed to let her continue her search, though he remained cautious. They decided to take small steps, trying to find information about the boy without disrupting his life. The boy, unaware of their efforts, continued his day in the hidden corners of the city. He found small scraps of food, avoided trouble, and stayed alert to the dangers around him. Yet despite the challenges, he felt a growing sense of hope. He had done something meaningful, and that memory gave him a quiet strength. He imagined a life where bravery and kindness could change not only his world, but the world of others around him. It was a new feeling, one he had never allowed himself to feel before. As night fell, the streets grew quieter, and the boy prepared to rest again. He found a safe corner, wrapped himself in his thin jacket, and allowed his mind to wander. He thought about the woman, her grateful eyes, and the warmth she had shown him in that brief moment. He didn't know why she had mattered so much to him, but he felt a strange connection, a bond formed in an instant through courage and trust. That bond stayed with him as he drifted into sleep, carrying the hope that life could hold more than survival. Somewhere in the city, the woman continued her search, determined not to give up. She walked the streets, asked questions, and observed every movement, hoping to find the boy who had changed her life in a single moment. She imagined what it would be like to see him again, to thank him properly, and perhaps to help him in ways she could not yet imagine. Her heart was full of hope and determination, driving her forward even as the city swallowed her in its busy rhythm. The boy slept fitfully that night, dreaming of courage, hope, and kindness. He had acted without thinking, without fear, and it had changed something inside him. He felt alive in a way he had never felt before, and he carried that feeling with him into the next day. Little did he know, his actions had already set in motion a chain of events that would bring him face to face with the woman once again. And that encounter would begin a journey neither of them could have predicted. The city was large and the streets were full of hidden stories, but somehow fate had found a way to connect their lives, and the ripple of bravery and kindness had only just begun. The morning sun crept slowly over the city, spilling golden light across the streets. The boy was already awake, crouched in his usual hidden corner, stretching his stiff limbs and scanning the alleys for any sign of danger. Life on the streets taught him to be alert at all times, but today, his mind wandered back to the woman he had saved. Her face, her eyes, the gentle gratitude in her expression lingered in his thoughts. He could not understand why he felt a connection to her, but it made him move with a sense of purpose that he had never known before. Meanwhile, the woman had begun to take more deliberate steps to find him. She hired a few local helpers, people familiar with the streets, to keep an eye out for any boy matching the description she had. She didn't want to make a scene or draw attention that might frighten him, so she worked quietly, guiding her helpers with care and concern. Each day she would go to the same areas where the accident had happened, observing, asking questions, and watching for the smallest signs that the boy might be nearby. The boy continued his survival routine. He wandered through narrow alleys, avoided busy streets, and searched for food. He was careful not to attract too much attention, but he noticed something strange. More people seemed to be looking at him, noticing him in ways that felt unusual. It made him uneasy. He had always been invisible to the world, and the attention unsettled him. Yet there was also a faint, unexplainable hope that maybe this attention was not all bad, that someone might care. As he moved through the streets, he noticed a small girl sitting on the steps of a building, shivering in the cold morning air. She looked hungry and scared, much like he had felt many times. He approached her cautiously, offering the scraps of bread he had saved. The girl's eyes widened with gratitude, and she took the food carefully, not trusting that it was real. He smiled at her, a small gesture that carried warmth despite his own struggles. Helping her gave him a quiet satisfaction, and reminded him that courage and kindness were not limited to heroic moments. They could exist in the small acts of everyday life. Back at her home, the woman felt restless. Her curiosity about the boy grew stronger every day. She could not stop thinking about how someone so young, so vulnerable, had risked his life for hers. She wondered what his life was like, what hardships he had faced, and how he managed to survive each day. Her heart ached for him, knowing that the world had been cruel, yet he had managed to show bravery and kindness. She began to imagine ways she could help him, ways that would not make him feel patronized but instead respected. The boy, still unaware of her efforts, found himself facing an unexpected challenge that morning. As he moved through a quiet street, a man approached him, suspicious and aggressive. The man accused him of stealing from a nearby shop, even though he had done nothing wrong. The boy's heart raced and he instinctively backed away, trying to explain that he had not taken anything. The man did not listen, and soon a small crowd gathered, drawn by the confrontation. Fear and anger mixed in the boy's chest, but he knew he had to stay calm. Just as the situation seemed about to escalate, the boy made a split-second decision. He bolted down a narrow alley, dodging people and obstacles with agility born of years surviving on the streets. The man shouted after him and the crowd murmured. But the boy disappeared quickly, leaving behind the chaos he had narrowly escaped. Once he was safely hidden, he leaned against a wall, breathing heavily, his heart still pounding. The incident reminded him of how fragile his life was, and how easily danger could find him even when he had done nothing wrong. Meanwhile, the woman's helpers had received reports of a boy fitting the description, seen near the streets where the incident occurred. She felt a surge of hope and quickly went to the area, moving carefully and observing every alley, every corner. Her heart raced as she thought that perhaps today, she would finally find him. She walked slowly, scanning the crowds, hoping to see the boy's small frame, his cautious movements, and the unmistakable determination in his eyes. The boy, sensing that something unusual was happening, grew more cautious. He noticed people watching him differently, and it made him uneasy. He had learned to trust his instincts, and today they warned him to be careful. He moved through less crowded streets, avoiding main roads, slipping through narrow alleys where he could stay hidden. Yet even as he tried to stay unseen, he could not ignore a strange feeling in his chest, a sense that someone was looking out for him, that someone cared. As the woman moved closer, she caught a glimpse of a small figure darting between buildings. Her heart leapt and she followed quietly, careful not to scare him away. She observed him as he helped another small child, offering food and a comforting smile. Her admiration grew stronger, and she felt a deep desire to protect him, to ensure that someone so brave and kind would not have to face the harshness of the streets alone. The boy eventually found a safe place to rest for a while, a small abandoned building with broken windows and a roof that offered shelter from the elements. He settled in a corner, pulling his jacket around him, and allowed himself a moment to breathe. The memory of yesterday, the fear he had faced, and the strange attention today all swirled in his mind. Yet he felt a quiet pride. He had acted with courage, helped others, and survived. These moments, small as they were, mattered to him in a way nothing else ever had. The woman, still searching, moved carefully through the streets, following the trail as best she could. She observed his actions, saw the way he helped others, and felt a growing sense of connection. She realized that this boy was not only brave but also compassionate, a rare combination that left a lasting impression. She thought about how she could reach him, how she could show him that someone cared without frightening him or making him feel obligated. As evening approached, the boy decided to move again. He navigated through quieter streets, avoiding the busy main roads, and kept an eye out for anyone who might be following him. Despite his caution, he felt a strange pull, as if fate was leading him somewhere. He did not know that the woman was nearby, watching and hoping to connect with him. The thought that someone might care for him, that someone might understand him, was both exciting and frightening. The woman finally found a place to rest, a small bench where she could sit and observe. She watched as the boy disappeared into an alley, helping another child along the way. She felt a mix of relief, admiration, and determination. She knew she had to find a way to reach him, to show him kindness and gratitude without overwhelming him. Her heart was full of hope, and she promised herself that she would not give up. The boy, unaware of her presence, continued his journey, searching for food, safety, and shelter. He reflected on the day's events, the fear he had felt, the people he had helped, and the strange sense of being observed. Despite the challenges, he felt a growing sense of hope, a belief that perhaps his life could change. He imagined a future where he was safe, where he could help others, and where courage and kindness mattered. Night fell, and the streets grew quiet. The boy found a safe corner in an abandoned building, curled up in his thin jacket, and allowed himself to rest. His thoughts wandered to the woman, the children he had helped, and the strange sense of purpose he felt. For the first time in his life, he felt that he mattered, that his actions had meaning. The city, with all its danger and harshness, had given him a moment of connection, and he held on to that feeling as he drifted into sleep. Somewhere nearby, the woman remained vigilant. She did not leave the area, knowing that the boy might return or move again. She thought about how she could approach him safely, how she could offer help without frightening him. Her admiration and concern for him grew stronger, and she felt a deep sense of responsibility. Someone had shown such courage, and she wanted to ensure that he was not alone in facing the challenges of the streets. The boy slept fitfully, dreaming of courage, hope, and the small acts of kindness that had defined his day. He had faced danger, helped others, and survived another day on the streets. These experiences, though small in the eyes of the world, were monumental for him. They gave him strength, hope, and a sense of purpose he had never known. Little did he know, the woman's presence nearby and her efforts to find him were beginning to set the stage for a connection that would change both their lives forever. As the night deepened, the city settled into quiet rhythms. The boy, curled in his corner, held on to the memories of the day, the acts of bravery, and the glimpses of human kindness. Somewhere in the shadows, the woman remained determined, watching, waiting, and planning how to reach him. The threads of fate had begun to weave their lives together, and the events of the day had set in motion a journey neither of them could yet imagine. Courage, kindness, and determination had drawn them together, and the ripples of their actions were only beginning to spread across the city, touching lives in ways both small and profound. The boy woke early that morning, the faint sunlight filtering through the cracks of the abandoned building where he had slept. He felt the usual chill of the city streets, but something inside him had shifted. Yesterday, today, and even the day before, they all had a strange weight, a feeling that the world was watching him in ways it never had before. He moved carefully, stretching his stiff limbs, ready to face another day on the streets. Hunger, cold, and the usual dangers were waiting, but so was a sense of purpose that made his steps lighter, more deliberate. Meanwhile, the woman had finally received a lead from one of her helpers. They had spotted a boy matching the description in a nearby alley, helping another child with a small scrap of food. Her heart raced as she moved through the streets herself, careful not to frighten him. Every step brought her closer, and yet every corner she turned, she feared missing him. The city was vast, crowded, and unpredictable, but she had grown determined. She knew that the boy had shown a bravery that could not be ignored, and she felt a responsibility to reach him. The boy, unaware that he was being sought, continued his day with caution. He avoided crowded streets, slipping through narrow alleys where he knew no one would follow. He found small scraps of food left by a nearby cafe and shared them with a younger child who looked desperate. Even in his own struggles, he had learned that helping others, even in small ways, brought a sense of satisfaction he could not find anywhere else. It was a rare form of strength, one that made him feel human in a world that often treated him like he was invisible. The woman finally spotted him. He was crouched by the steps of an old building, sharing bread with another child. She stood at a distance, observing quietly. There was something about the way he moved, the careful way he helped the child, that told her he was not just brave, but compassionate. Her heart ached as she watched him, realizing how difficult his life must be, how much courage it must take just to survive. She knew that she had to reach him, but she had to do so gently, without scaring him away. After a moment of hesitation, she stepped closer, her movements slow and deliberate. The boy noticed her, his small frame tensing instinctively. He had learned that the world could be dangerous, that strangers could bring harm, and he had been cautious his entire life. But there was something different about this woman. She did not move aggressively or demand attention. She simply stood there, her gaze soft, her presence calm. "I want to thank you," she said quietly, her voice carrying a mix of gratitude and respect. The boy looked at her, unsure how to react. He had never been thanked for anything, certainly not in such a sincere way. His instincts told him to run, to hide, but curiosity and the warmth in her eyes held him in place. "You saved me," she continued. "You didn't have to, but you did. And I want to make sure you're safe, that you're okay." Her words were simple, but they carried a weight the boy had never felt before. He blinked, unsure what to say, unsure how to respond to kindness he had rarely experienced. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. The boy, wary but curious, and the woman, determined but gentle. She could see the weariness in his eyes, the hunger and struggle etched into his small frame, and yet she could also see strength, resilience, and a courage that went far beyond his years. It was a rare and beautiful combination, one that left her both humbled and inspired. Finally, the boy spoke, his voice small and cautious. I don't need help. I can manage." He tried to appear strong, but his words lacked conviction. The truth was, he had never known what it felt like to be truly safe, to have someone care for him without expecting anything in return. "I understand," the woman replied softly, "but I want to offer it anyway. You don't have to take it if you don't want to." I just want you to know that someone cares." Her sincerity was clear, and the boy felt something stir inside him, a mix of hope and fear. He had never allowed himself to hope, never allowed himself to believe that someone might genuinely care. Over the next few minutes, they talked quietly. She asked him about his life in simple, gentle ways, and he responded cautiously, sharing small pieces of his story. He spoke of the streets, of the challenges he faced, and of the small acts of kindness he had witnessed along the way. She listened without judgment, her presence steady and comforting. For the first time, the boy felt that he could be seen and heard without fear, that his experiences and his bravery mattered. As the conversation continued, she began to introduce small ideas about how she could help him, without taking away his independence. She spoke of opportunities for food, shelter, and learning, but she framed them as choices, not demands. She wanted him to feel empowered, not controlled. The boy listened, intrigued but cautious. It was rare for anyone to offer him anything without strings attached, without expecting repayment or obedience. Days passed, and the woman continued to visit, slowly building trust with the boy. He began to allow himself small moments of connection, sharing more of his thoughts and experiences. He showed her the hidden corners of the city, the places he found safety and food, and the children he sometimes helped. She observed quietly, impressed by his resourcefulness, his courage, and his compassion. She realized that despite his hardships, he had a remarkable inner strength that had carried him through countless challenges. Meanwhile, the boy began to see her as a safe presence, someone who did not judge him or expect him to change immediately. He appreciated her patience, her gentle manner, and the way she treated him with respect. Slowly, he allowed himself to believe that perhaps life could offer more than survival on the streets, that there might be a place for him where he could grow, learn, and be safe. One afternoon, a small incident tested the trust they had built. A man approached, questioning the boy about food he had taken from a nearby vendor. The boy instinctively froze, his old habits kicking in, ready to flee. But the woman stepped forward calmly, speaking to the man firmly and kindly. She protected the boy without scolding or embarrassing him, and the man eventually walked away. The boy watched her, amazed at her bravery and care. For the first time, he realized that someone could stand by him and fight for him, and that realization brought tears he had not allowed himself to shed in years. Over time, their bond grew stronger. The woman continued to find ways to support him, offering food, warm clothing, and quiet guidance. She never forced him to accept help, but she provided options, choices that allowed him to maintain his dignity and independence. The boy began to trust her, to see her as a friend and protector rather than a stranger or authority figure. He shared more of his dreams, small hopes for the future, and even his fears. She listened patiently, offering reassurance and encouragement without pressure. One evening, as the city lights flickered on, the boy sat with the woman in a quiet corner of the streets. They watched the world move around them, the people hurrying home, the sounds of the city alive and vibrant. He felt a sense of peace he had never known, a rare feeling of being safe, seen, and understood. She smiled at him, knowing that their connection had grown into something meaningful and transformative. The boy realized that he could start to imagine a future beyond the streets, a life where he could grow, learn, and help others. The woman had shown him that kindness and courage could coexist, and that the world, while harsh, also held people willing to care. For the first time, he allowed himself to hope that life could change, that he could have more than survival, that he could be valued and respected. And so, in the quiet of the evening, two lives touched by bravery, courage, and unexpected kindness began to intertwine. The boy, once invisible and alone, found a protector and friend. The woman, moved by his courage and compassion, discovered a rare human connection that went beyond her wealth and comfort. Together they began a journey that neither could have imagined, a journey that would transform both their lives in ways they had never thought possible. The city, with all its challenges, now held a small space of hope, trust, and care, a space where courage and kindness met and changed everything.